Hey everyone, we're back again. I'm Minister James Moss. This is Continuing Education, and we are in the book of Luke, the Gospel according to Luke. And this one, we're in chapter 7, so we're going to cover verses 11 through 17. This one is entitled, Jesus Raises a Widow's Son from the Dead. All right, so don't be spooked out. Just, it's okay. It's all right. All right, so we're going to get right in touch, right into it. Okay. With a touch of his word, Jesus gave life. He had already healed a number of maladies, demon possessions, sin, and all kinds of diseases. Here, Jesus clearly demonstrated his power over death. All right, let's do it. And it came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain, and many of the disciples went with him, and much people. Now, when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, Weep not. And he came and touched the bier, and they that bare him stood still. And he said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. And there came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, and that God hath visited his people. And this rumor of him went forth throughout all Judea and throughout all the region round about. All right. So, let's do it. Here we go. All right, verses 11 and 12. The village of Nain was a few miles southeast of Nazareth and about a day's journey from Capernaum. Upon approaching the gate, they came upon a funeral procession. A woman led the procession, followed by the dead man being carried out, and then many mourners. A funeral procession, the relatives of the dead person following the body that was wrapped and carried on a kind of stretcher, would make its way through town. As the procession passed, bystanders would be expected to join. In addition, hired mourners would cry aloud and draw attention to the procession. What made this funeral especially sad was that the dead boy was the only son of a widow. Verse 13, this woman had already lost her husband, and here her only son was dead, her last means of support. The crowd of mourners would go home, and she would be left penniless and alone. The widow was probably past the age of childbearing and would not marry again. Unless a relative would come to her aid, her future was bleak. In the first century, it was very difficult for a woman to earn her own living. Without anyone to provide for the widow, she would be an easy prey for swindlers, and she would likely be reduced to begging for food. No wonder when the Lord saw this sad sight in the tearful woman, his heart overflowed with compassion. In fact, as Luke repeatedly emphasized, Jesus cares about people's deepest needs. As Jesus' crowd met the crowd of mourners, Jesus went to the woman and gently said, Don't cry. This would be an empty statement under most circumstances. However, Jesus, Lord over death itself, was going to change the circumstances. Jesus has the power to bring hope out of any tragedy. Jesus again reached out to someone in need with compassion, risking becoming unclean. To even touch the bier would have made him unclean. Risking ceremonial defilement according to the law, Jesus touched the coffin. Jesus approaching the procession and touching the coffin was highly unusual, so the bearers stopped. Then Jesus spoke directly to the body, Get up. Suddenly, verse 15, suddenly the boy who had been dead sat up and began to talk. What he said is left to our imagination, but the important point is that Jesus gave him back to his mother. Jesus did the ultimate act of compassion. He did what no human could have done. These words were almost identical to 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 23, when the great Old Testament prophet Elijah brought a widow's only son back to life. Verse 16, the miracle of raising a widow's son to life brought the people's minds to the story of Elijah and the widow of Zarephath. The people praised God and exclaimed that a mighty prophet had arrived among them. The people thought of Jesus as a prophet because, like the Old Testament prophets, he boldly proclaimed God's message and performed great miracles. Both Elijah and Elisha had raised children from the dead. The people were correct in thinking that Jesus was a prophet, but he was much more. He was God himself. That they recognized the hand of God at work probably does not mean that they recognized Jesus as God. Instead, they were using an Old Testament expression that often denoted blessing. Verse 17, the obvious result of Jesus' miraculous act of raising a dead person to life meant that the report of what Jesus had done that day spread everywhere. The town of Nain is actually in the region of Galilee, so the word Judea is used here not for the region, but for the entire land of the Jews. Word about Jesus went all over the country and beyond. All right. And imagine that, man. I mean, you know, Jesus is coming into town with his crew, and, you know, they're walking and talking, and they walk into what is a funeral procession walking in the opposite direction, headed toward them, I guess, toward a burial area outside the city. And Jesus recognized that the cost of this loss of this woman's only son, she had already lost her husband, and now that when her son dies, unless some family member or somebody else is going to take compassion on this widow, she's going to be rendered poor and penniless and homeless, and that her life is going to really make a turn for the worse. But as long as her son is alive, she has someone to help take care of her, help provide, and into her declining years, help not make it such a burden, you know, for her to survive. So he saw beyond just the death of this young man, and he saw the pain and anguish that this woman would have had to endure had the son been buried. So awesome story. Go back, reread it, listen to the commentary again, and then just search yourself and see, you know, what can I pull from this, God? What lesson can I learn from this and apply it to my life? All right. God bless you. God keep you. And until next time, remember, as I always say, continue to study.